Joe Biden says President Trump is waving a white flag and surrendering to the coronavirus. During a speech in Pennsylvania Wednesday, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee slammed the president's handling of the virus outbreak and Mr. Trump's plan to hold a campaign rally this weekend. Biden also discussed steps he would take to reopen the economy safely.
Unlike any other wartime leader, he takes no responsibility. He exercises no leadership. Now he's just flat surrendering the fight. Instead of leading the charge to defeat the virus, he just basically waved a white flag and has retreated. The American people have sacrificed so much to fight this virus. We've lost lives. We've lost businesses. We've lost paychecks. And now, thanks to Donald Trump's bungling, we may lose some of the progress we've begun to make. All because he's lost interest. He's once again ignoring the facts. Americans need a president who will put the American people first, not his or her own ego. America needs a president who will do the work. I'm ready on day one after more than 3 years in office. Why isn't Donald Trump ready? Mr. President, wake up. Get to work. There's so much more to be done.
For more on this, I want to bring in Jennifer Epps-Addison. She is the president and co-executive director of the Center for Popular Democracy. And we want to note the Center for Popular Democracy endorsed Senator Bernie Sanders for the Democratic presidential nomination. Jennifer, welcome. Thanks very much for being with us. We just heard some of Joe Biden's criticisms of President Trump as he tries to contrast his plans with the president's push to reopen quickly. What do you think about that? Is that the right approach?
Well, listen, it is clear to anybody who lives in this country that President Trump has mismanaged this pandemic and that lives have been lost as a result. But I think what's important to understand is that the American people who are struggling, who haven't gotten assistance for rent, who haven't gotten assistance for food, many of whom who just lost their health care because our healthcare system is tied to your employment, and nearly 40 million people have filed for unemployment since this pandemic began. They're not just looking at what President Trump is doing. They're looking at the Democrats who control the House and saying, why haven't you passed emergency rent assistance and cash assistance? And they're looking at Democratic mayors across this country who in the middle of a pandemic are increasing the budget of their police force rather than providing the need their communities need. And so we understand that this is a problem of leadership, absolutely, but the American people are calling for a much bolder leadership and asking Joe Biden to step in to a much bolder leadership than just attacking Donald Trump.
Well, in recent weeks, Joe Biden has laid out steps that he would take to address police reform if elected. What policies, Jennifer, would you like to see him pursue?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is that Joe Biden has taken a step in the right direction, but there is a long way to go. And in fact, our network, along with 50 racial justice organizations led by groups like Black Voters Matter and the Working Families Party, submitted a letter to Joe Biden calling for him to step up and do much, much more. I think what people have to understand is that every policy laid out in the Justice in Policing Act is about stopping Black people from being killed, right? An end to chokeholds, a national registry for police abuse. It's about stopping death. What we are saying and what the Movement for Black Lives has called on us to really understand is that Black communities deserve so much more than to just not die at the hands of the police. That is not real freedom. And so where the movement is at is calling for a true transformation of our criminal justice system so that all of us have the things that we need to thrive. We're calling on, the hashtag defund police is really about just that. We spend trillions of dollars, $1 trillion over 5 years, just on policing in this country. We could be spending that money investing in building strong communities and real public safety. And that's what this movement is calling for. And that's what Joe Biden is going to have to contend with if he wants to harness the power of these protests and the people who are in the streets now into a victory in November.
So I want to follow up on that issue. Earlier this month, Joe Biden said that defunding the police, quote, depends on the community. Do you support that approach?
I think if you look at Ayanna Pressley's People's Justice Guarantee, it is the epitome of what we hope federal policy will be, right? It looks not just at the harmful impact of the 1994 crime bill, which Joe Biden, authored and sponsored, basically wrote, but it also calls to task the types of reforms that President Trump has been pushing. Because let's remember that the president will also be going on the campaign trail running as a criminal justice reformer. What we want to see happen is that the communities who are most impacted both by violence and by mass incarceration are at the helm of deciding what safety looks like and how to achieve it. We want to turn those millions of dollars over to the community to invest in things that truly make them safe. And I'll just give you an example. The LAPD tweeted out today that, their $3 billion budget isn't that much. When you think about it, it's only $8.2 million a day. Well, I'll tell you, we can do a whole lot if cities were investing $8.2 million a day in the needs of the people in their community who are struggling the most, rather than policing them, criminalizing them, caging them, and separating their families. So I think there's a whole lot to be done, and we have to grapple with the fact that as a society, our politicians, led by bills that Joe Biden helped pass, have prioritized caging and separating and harming our families instead of true public safety.
In our final minutes left, I want to get your thoughts, Jennifer, on who you would like to see Joe Biden choose to become his vice presidential pick.
Well, our network did engage in an endorsement process, and in that process, we talked about what we need to see out of the new leaders of this country. We need people who understand that Americans are struggling, that people are making impossible choices between paying for medicine and food and daycare, that corporations have run rugshot over our economy and are holding us all hostage. And so, we want to see a vice presidential candidate who will unify the progressive wing of the party, who's 30 to 40% of the base of this party, and we need to be enthusiastic about coming out to vote in November. And in this moment where Black communities are rising up, right, and are demanding real transformation, I think it is critical that our vice presidential candidate have a long history of working on racial justice issues, and in particular, of working with organizations and community activists who have been in this battle for many, many years. That's what we need to see as a vice president. And I'll just say one last thing, which is in this era of Black Lives Matter, as we look at and atone for the policing that has criminalized so many people, the idea that Joe Biden would pick a prosecutor or a cop, somebody who has been intimately involved in those systems of mass incarceration as a vice president, strikes me as a very poor strategic choice. I think that Donald Trump would love that, and Donald Trump will run with that and say, I'm the true criminal justice reform ticket, and that is a recipe for disaster in November.
So just to be clear, Jennifer, it sounds like you do not support the idea of a Kamala Harris or a Val Demings as a vice presidential pick. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that if somebody has not shown and demonstrated that they understand where the movement is at, and the movement is at completely reimagining public safety, not bolstering and investing more in policing, then they should not be the nominee, because I think it will make the ticket weak against President Trump. I think we should look at people who have been talking about the structural reforms and who have a real understanding of how we need to attack systemic racism in this country, through their policy work.
Jennifer Epps-Addison. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.